Why inexperienced? I started as the youth pastor down in Tampa in 1996. I'm taking y'all way, way back. You can turn the monitors down a little bit now. I'm like echoing on myself a little bit. I always don't like too much monitors when I'm talking. And so through our youth ministry, it quickly grew to become bigger than our adult congregation. Fast forward over the next couple of years, our youth ministry grew to where we had hundreds and hundreds of unchurched kids that were busing in from the housing projects and kids coming from the neighborhood, and they were all unchurched. They didn't have church etiquette. They didn't know how to act in church, but God was moving, and kids were getting saved, and God was moving in incredible ways. And during those first 6 years as I was the youth pastor, I watched us have 3 different lead pastors. Like every 2 years, they would switch up and change because the lead pastor was bivocational. They would get burned out. And then like every single time I was asked, hey, Tommy, you want to step up and be the pastor? I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm the youth pastor. We got a whole bunch of kids. I'm busy. I'm doing a lot. I'm called to do youth ministry. I don't ever want to be the lead pastor. No. I kept saying that, right? But in 2001, the lead pastor, the third pastor by that time, he was getting tired. And he was a little older, and he was just worn out. And he was like, man, I'm about to tap out. We need to find another pastor. You need to step up. And I'm like, no, pastor, how can I help you? Like, rubbing his back, like, I'll preach, whenever you want. Like, don't leave, But he took a sabbatical for a couple months, and I had to take over by default. And God began to work on my heart and say, I need you to step up and do this. So I was like, okay, God, I'll do it for a little bit until we find the next guy, but we're going to keep looking. Beginning of 2002, I took over, and a few months into it, I realized, I think we found him. Yeah, it's me, right? At the time, y'all, I was only 28 years old. And so I was very young, and I was one of the oldest people at the church. There was maybe 8 or 9 people that were older than me, and all of them happened to be on the board. Anybody know about the board? The church board, right? And so I'm the young buck on the board, and I'm on the board as well as the youth pastor. And a few of them were unsure that I could really do this job. And they even out loud said, well, you're inexperienced. And it was hurtful a little bit, because these people had watched miracles of God happen in our youth ministry and through what God was allowing me to lead. And I led a team of dozens of adults that were the youth leaders. They were more than half of the church. The church only had 40 adults coming on Sunday. More than half of them were my leaders, my adult leaders, right? And things were super structured, and by that time I was signed to a national record label, and I was traveling, and God was doing all these miracles. And there were some adults at my church that were still like, he's inexperienced, I don't know if this is gonna work, right? And so that label, this negative label right here, it pushed me. It fueled me. To be like, nah, I'm gonna prove myself. I'm gonna show you inexperienced. And so I think in some ways it can be good when somebody challenges us and gives us a negative label, but we can't let that be the only fuel.
Come on.
We can't do this ministry stuff to prove somebody wrong.
Amen.
To heal a father wound, to heal somebody that church hurted us. Right? Is that a word? Right? We gotta do this for the right reasons. And say, God, fuel me. Give me the energy to push forward. We got to be careful because we got to make sure that our passion from God, our calling from God, that's the main reason. That's our why. That's our why. Y'all feel me today? So one of my favorite books from the Bible is Nehemiah. Anybody like Nehemiah out there? At the top of 2023, I re-released this book that I wrote that was based on Nehemiah. It's called Rebuild. And anybody read Bible plans on the YouVersion app? There's a Rebuild reading plan on there. It's a 5-day reading plan. So I encourage you, tap into that at some point. Maybe even this week, tap into that. That came out a couple of months ago. And Nehemiah chapter 2. I want to look at that, and we're going to start in verse 16. But let me catch everybody up really quick before we get to that and what was happening at this point in time, because we're already in chapter 2. So what was happening before that? Nehemiah's people have been in captivity for a minute, for a couple generations. And Nehemiah was born into captivity, and he worked in the palace. He had a good job. He was the cupbearer. That's basically like you try everything before the king tries, and if you stay alive, then the king can eat it. My brother was eating good, let me tell you, but it was a risky job. Probably had good life insurance, right? So, anyway, so Nehemiah's in the palace, like living his cushy job in the bougie palace, and everything's going well. And along comes a guy named Hanani that he knew. It says it was his brother, like a friend, right? A relative maybe. And he had went back to where their people were from, Jerusalem, because the king allowed some people to go back and rebuild. He was like, hey, Hanani, how's it going? How's everything going in Jerusalem? Back where our people are from originally. I've heard stories about. And Hanani told him, man, it's bad, bro. Like, there's a recession, there was a pandemic, there was an epidemic, there was all this stuff happening, there's a famine, there's like, it's bad. People don't have food, they don't have jobs. And instead of saying the typical Christian thing that we all say, we say, what? I'll what? Pray for you, right? He actually really prayed. His heart was broken with compassion. And he was like, man, he was like, God, what can I do about this? He wept, he prayed, he fasted. Scholars say for a couple of months. Right? And then God gave him this game plan to go back and rebuild the walls. And so he approached the king. Miraculously, the king said, yes. And so he goes back and to where his people are from. And he's starting to rebuild the walls. And so he arrives in Jerusalem, right? At first, he's not rebuilding. He arrives there and he's checking everything out. And then he goes to the leaders of the city. And that leads us to verse 16. It says this. It says the city officials did not know I had been out there, what I was doing. I had not yet said anything to anyone about my plans. I had not spoken to the Jewish leaders, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or anyone that was in the administration. But now I said to them, you know very well what trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins. Its gates have been destroyed by fire. Let us, what's that next word, y'all? Rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. Then I told them about the gracious hand of God, how he'd been on me, and about my conversation with the king. And they replied at once. What did they respond? What's that next word? Yes. Somebody say yes. Yes, let's rebuild the wall. And so they began the good work. How many of you church leaders here would be able to say, man, my church is in a season of rebuilding? Raise your hand if you would say that. My hand's up. Our churches have all pretty much been in a season of rebuilding coming out of the pandemic. I mean, it's been a season of rebuilding. But who is the church? What is the church? We're here gathering today to talk about the church. Well, if you have a relationship with Jesus, we are the church. Amen. I had this jam back in the day. I am the church. You are the church. We are the church. It's our spiritual rebirth. It ain't the building. It ain't the people. Look at the biblical context. It's the people, right? It's not the building. It's not the steeple. The biblical context is it's us. And so today in this very last session, before we break and have dinner and fellowship and hang out and come back for the concert, the fun part tonight, I want us to land the plane today with talking about us. We could go and say, oh, we're going to do this in our youth ministry. We're going to do this in our church. We're going to do this with outreach. We're going to do this with boom, 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 right? That's all great. But we got to leave rebranded ourselves because we are the church. If we're going to change that narrative about the church, we got to rebrand us. So in this passage, the people of God in Jerusalem, they looked defeated. The walls were broken down. There was a famine. There was a recession. People were spiritually depressed. Right? Now let's be honest. In this season, through a lot of lenses, a lot of frames, the people of God can look defeated. We do. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. You know, I read an article recently from a major news outlet that said since the pandemic, church attendance is down by 1/3. Most churches are only back to 2/3 of what they were, and the 1/3 that hasn't returned back is not coming back. It's a wrap. They're gone. I've talked to some church leaders that their church is still only maybe at 40% or 50% of where they were pre-pandemic. Man, that's discouraging. That's tough. That's tough as a leader if you ever get on a platform and sing or preach or teach or whatever, and you look out in the crowd and you just see a whole bunch of empty seats where you used to saw people. It's not about full and empty, it's about those people. And you're like, man, where are those people? I know those people, I love those people, I did life with those people, and they just disappeared. They're gone, right? The pandemic brought all kinds of division. You know, with masks or no mask, or shot or no shot, or racial injustice, political division like we've never seen before. And a lot of people left the church because they didn't like the church, the way the church responded to it. They didn't like what the church said or what the church didn't say. Right? It was hard to keep everybody happy at all with all the different stuff that was going on. And so there was just some people that just bounced, I'm out. Even if that had been their church their whole life, they're gone. Then there's others that they didn't really have any beef with the church. They just got used to not going to church for a while. And they started new rhythms and like, I kind of like being off on Sunday. This is kind of nice. We go out to brunch. We just sleep in, we hang out. We saved on gas money. Wow, maybe I'll just watch online. You know, and then, you know, they're watching online and doing the dishes and the kids are yelling and they're not really they're not engaged like they are when they're in the room necessarily, right? Let's be real, let's talk about it. And the church has taken a lot of hits the past couple of years because there's been additional scandals, division, bad teaching, and everybody's looking at screens more than ever. And there's all this bad news on the screens about the church, right? And so what is the church known for today generally in social media and mainstream media? It doesn't have a good narrative. It's known to be judgmental. It's known to be political. It's known to be out of touch. It's known to be hateful, mean, boring. That's what the narrative about the church is known to be by a lot of people in this city, in my city, around this country. That's why it's so desperately needed that we need to change the narrative. We got to rebrand the church. But we are the church. And so when I'm here in New York City and I'm watching from Florida and I'm talking to leaders here and I'm saying you guys have had it a lot tougher than us and it's been super challenging. But when I'm here today in this room and I see people worshiping and I hear people's stories and I hear the ministry that's happening, man, let me tell you something. From Tampa, I'm encouraged. The church in New York City is still alive. It's alive and well. And there's a spark that's happening. And there's something even new happening in the CHH scene right here in New York City as well. There's new talent and new artists that are bubbling and God is doing something special. And so we just thought it was like so appropriate, especially on the 50-year anniversary of hip hop, that we come to the place that hip hop was birthed and we just celebrate Jesus. And we say, man, let's rebrand the church. And the church can come out of the pandemic even stronger, right? So our church has always been a place that has been big eyes on trying to reach unchurched people and de-churched people. De-churched, if you didn't know, that's people that used to go to church, but they faded out. We're like, man, come back home, right? So we're always trying to pay attention to what's happening in culture and what's happening in the world so we can find relevant ways to present Jesus and point people to Jesus. Well, we're not changing the message. But the presentation of the message is always going to be evolving. And we're going to do new things. We're going to do different things. We're going to be innovative. We're going to be creative because God's given that to us, right? And so as we consider all those things, every year we pray at our church. We say, God, give us the word for this year. Give us the theme for this year, right? And so, unfortunately, what the church is known for is many times totally different than what it's really supposed to be, right? And so this year our vision for Flavor Fest and for Crossover Church has been to rebrand, to change the narrative. And it's based on this scripture found in John 13:35. And this is kind of where we got the whole biblical basis of what it means to rebrand. If you could pop that up there. What's that second word in red? Your what? Love. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. You're my disciples. In Flavor Fest family, New York City, we got to turn up the love in 2023. Wow. In these 5 boroughs. Queens, where you at? Brooklyn, where you at? Yeah. Bronx, where you at? Yeah. Staten Island, where you at? Okay, a couple people. Eric B, where you at? in Staten Island, where you at? Where you at? Oh, Manhattan, where you at? Okay. Listen, we gotta turn up. We gotta turn up for Jesus, y'all, in 2023. Long Island, where you at? New Jersey, where you at? Pennsylvania, where you at? Okay, I know we got some people out the whole tri-state area. Anybody else, where you at? So listen, God gave us some of these words for our church and for Flavor Fest in 2023. I pray it resonates with you. Put that next slide up. So when we thought about rebranding and changing the narrative, we just said this. God dropped this on me. I said, we don't want to follow the trends. Help me out. We what? We're not outdated. We're not a gathering. We're here to not hate. We're here to not take. We're here to not be served. We're not Republican or Democrat. We're not just white, black, or brown. We're what? We're diverse. We won't isolate, will. We won't get stuck, will. Come on, make some noise if you believe that. That's what we got to do as the church. So, two main things I want to leave us with today as we get ready to land this plane. Two ways I want to challenge our churches to rebrand in 2023. Number one is this. Number one is rebrand discipleship. Rebrand discipleship. We got to change the way our people look at following Jesus. Because we can't keep living a convenient Christianity. A safe Christianity. That's why half the people left our churches and didn't come back. Because they were living a convenient Christianity, a safe Christianity that if we're real, we kind of help them get into that groove. Because we got a little scared. If we raise the bar too high, they're going to get scared and they won't. They'll just leave. They won't jump in. So let's make it real easy. Let's make it real easy. And we made it so easy sometimes that when things got a little difficult and a pandemic showed up, people just tapped out. I'm out. Man. We followed a Christianity that just fit our schedule or our preferences. But following the real Jesus is when you arrange everything in your life around Him and His purposes, even if it's inconvenient, even if it doesn't fit your schedule, even if there's a little sacrifice involved, right? We have to learn to live that dangerous Christianity like the early church did.
Let's get it.
And our church right now is doing a series called Dangerous Jesus, based on KB's new book that came out. It's a great book. I highly recommend it, right? And so we got to rebrand who Jesus is, because our culture has hijacked Jesus and plugged it into all their agendas. We got political Jesus, we got patriot Jesus, we got weak Jesus, we got over spiritual Jesus, we got social justice Jesus, where let's just give people stuff and we don't tell them about the gospel or make them feel uncomfortable. But let's successful Jesus, if it's tapped into success and money, then it's Jesus. We don't want to talk about anything suffering, but so we tied all these other Jesuses, and it's not even a real Jesus. People are disillusioned, right? We got to get back to the real Jesus. Real discipleship. Dangerous discipleship, right? It takes sacrifice. It takes some grit. It takes, it's beautiful, but it's challenging. It's exciting, but it's scary. There's all kinds of favor, but there's some frustration at times, right? There's supernatural, undeniable miracles that take place. But there's also dying to your flesh every day.
Let's go.
And so it's not easy, it's challenging. There's going to be some sacrifice, there's going to be some suffering, but dangerous discipleship will open doors that you've never dreamed of. It'll change your city around, y'all. But here's the challenge, though. If you're taking notes, write this down. Your competency will get you in the room, but your character will keep you in the room. Let me say that one more time. Your competency, your talent, your gifts, the things you're good at, your skill set, it'll get you in the room because you're sharp. You're young, you're doing some great creative things, but it's your character that will keep you in the room. And we've watched a lot of sharp young leaders that were super talented because they didn't have that part right there we watch them fall off. And listen, we came to New York City today not to just entertain you, not to just get together and have an event. Like, look, we got a lot of stuff going on in Tampa, more than we can even handle. But we came here because we want to see your character be built up. We want to see you guys be the leaders and the pastors and the youth pastors and the future leaders and the artists and the entrepreneurs from the kingdom that are going to be able to make huge changes in this city and in this world, y'all. We believe in you guys. And there's so many leaders, because their character wasn't solid, they fell off. And we as leaders, we got to keep growing our character, and we got to give our people tools to grow their character. They're watching us. So what are we doing? I always like to say that leaders are readers. What are you reading? And listen, if you're not a reader, I know some of y'all already told me you're not, then be an Audible person and do the Audible books. Find a way to learn information, but you got to keep feeding yourself and growing as a leader, because guess what? Then you could become a lid. If you're not growing and your people are growing, they're gonna surpass you. They're gonna pass you. They're gonna lead, because, man, listen, the problem in so many churches is that the senior leadership many times doesn't empower the people that are around them. And many times churches never grow past about 100 people because the pastor wants to have his finger on everything. Maybe the pastor and just a few other people. And listen, once you get up to about 100, you can't manage more people than that. If you're really good, maybe 120, 130, but like the way our church grew and to all the people that we have today is because I learned to say, okay, I'm going to take my finger off of that. I trust you. Let me empower you. Let me see this thing even grow to the next level, because you have some skills that I don't have. You know, yes, I'm the one that helped found Flavor Fest. God kind of gave it to me as an idea. It was a necessity because all these people were coming to our church. But as our team grew, and I at the beginning was doing a whole bunch of stuff with the admin and everything, and I was booking flights and helping with things, and that's not even my gift. I don't even like doing that stuff. I'm a visionary, right? I can do that stuff, I have to, but I found some people on my team and empowered them and said, you're even better at this than I am, and this is your passion. And so, you know, I want y'all to make some crazy noise for Lily Perlaza right here. Come on, here, Lily. If you didn't know, she has been the director of Flavor Fest now for, like, it's been a lot of years. I don't even know how many, but I only did it for the first couple years, and then I was like, hey, Lily, right? And she was on the team, and we watched, and she watched and grew, and then passed the baton. And now I'm still there. I'm watching her do it, but I'm still there to help. I'm in a lot of the planning meetings, not all of them, but she's run. I empowered her as a leader, and Flavor Fest has grown and went beyond what I ever could have did because I empowered her. When she came to our church, she was like 19 years old, and now she's all grown up, and I'm old. Thank you, Lily. Come on, give it up for Lily one more time. So the way that Jesus led, and we got to rebrand discipleship, he did it like this. I do it, you watch. I do it, you help. You do it, I help. You do it, I watch. Let me say that one more time for you. I do it, you watch. I do it, you help. You do it, I help. You do it, I watch. We got to learn to have leadership like that. That's part of discipleship. When you begin to pass the baton to somebody else. I started leading some small groups over the last number of years. I led groups for artists and groups, you know, I'm a small group leader at my church, even though I'm the pastor. But I've always been an entrepreneur. And so I started leading a group for entrepreneurs and business leaders. And I did that several times, even pre-pandemic, but then the pandemic happened and we all had to go to Zoom for our groups. And soon there was dozens of people that were on the Zoom call that were business owners. And some of them were from California and Minnesota, and most of them were from Tampa, but we had people in other time zones coming for their time, 4 a.m., 6 a.m. We were doing it at 7 on East Coast time. But there was all these hungry business leaders and entrepreneurs that wanted kingdom principles and wanted community. And I started pouring into them. And then there was more and more entrepreneurs that started coming to my church, and then when we reopened, there was just this flood, this new wave of young entrepreneurs that were coming. We started to do some in-person events, and there was like 40, 50 people showing up. I'm like, man, this is amazing. Last year we did this event called the Innovation Summit. There was like 200 leaders, business leaders in our community that came. Most of them weren't even Christians. It was amazing, right? But so as I'm mentoring, some of these young business leaders, there was a guy that kind of like stood out. And I was like, man, I'm going to pass the baton to this guy. And we brought him here today. Some of y'all sat in his workshop. Y'all give it up for my man, Devon Stokes. Come on up here, Devon. I saw the potential and the gifts and talents in this young man. And even when you're a mentor, you can still learn stuff from the mentee. How many of y'all know that? I've learned a lot of things from Devon. This guy has an incredible story. We don't have time to get through all of it today. But he lost his wife 3 years ago, right when the pandemic started. He had a child. Him and his wife had a brand new baby boy, and a week later his wife passed from some complications. And the world shut down, all at the same time. It was a tough 2020 for this guy. I met him at the beginning of 2021. He started attending the church, a little bit here and there. He was like that monthly attender at first. And I was calling him and chasing him a little bit. I'm gonna be there this week. Devon didn't show up, right? Or he didn't even know the first year that we had a worship team. He didn't know what that sounded like. He came after worship every Sunday. That's how late he was. But beginning in 2022, this guy really tapped in. And I saw something, I believed in this guy. And man, he started coming to every service, every Bible study. He was serving on the worship team for a little while. And as we just kept building and growing, and I got to know him more, I'm like, man, this guy is so gifted as an entrepreneur. And about 6 months ago, passed the baton, and we officially then launched, we have an entrepreneur ministry that's called Crossoverpreneurs. And now, the last 2 events we did, there was over 100 entrepreneurs that came. And this guy's leading it. And he has a team that he meets with every week. I've watched in a couple meetings, but I'm generally not there. I'm not around. I'm just here to support. But man, I'm watching him take it to a level that I never could have. I never could have. He's going to take it to a whole nother. He's got dreams and visions, and he still talks through stuff with me regularly and stuff. But man, I can't wait to see what God's going to do. I believe the blueprint of an entrepreneurial ministry is something that it is outreach, but it's discipleship. It's discipleship in every church. I think in this gig economy that our culture is moving into, if churches can be the providers to help entrepreneurs and business people with their, y'all are in New York. All y'all got 7 jobs in New York. It's expensive here. But if your church can be a conduit for resources and mentorship, man, that's discipleship. You can change your city. You can change your community. So you need to connect with this guy. He'll be hanging out. So give it up for Devon. Love you, bro. Bye, somebody say empower. Empower. We got to empower the people. The second part, the last part that we got to rebrand is this. We got to rebrand outreach. A lot of churches died or dwindled during the pandemic, and that's because they didn't have an outreach strategy in place. That's because they didn't have that in their DNA, right? But the churches that had outreach and community stuff in their DNA, they survived. And many of them thrived. Many of them are in a better place now coming out of the pandemic than when they went in, right? And so we were closed at Crossover for about 7 months in 2020. I know in New York, y'all had to be closed for like over a year, and some of y'all had to reopen, then you had to close again, and it was just this, Florida, we're in a different country down there. But we were closed for 7 months, and it still had a lot of impacts. And when people first came back, we were only like half the crowd that came back at first, but the amount of people we were reaching dramatically grew. Our finances in 2020 was a record year. In 2021 was a record even more. 2022, a record even more. Our finances today are 34% higher than they were before the pandemic. I mean, it's a different game. As an urban ministry, I'm still pinching myself oh my goodness, we have money in the bank. We have reserves. We can buy something if it breaks. We can do a big outreach thing when God calls us to, and we don't have to have meetings and be okay, what are we gonna move around? How are we gonna cut corners? It's been incredible, right? There's a lot of factors for that. A lot of factors. Of course, we did a lot of outreach stuff online. We leveraged technology. In person, that was critical. But when the pandemic hit, y'all, we immediately went into action and we assessed the needs in our community. And here's the other thing. Because this was already in our DNA, we had partnerships in our community, like a long list of partners. There's power in partnership. Somebody say that. There's power in partnership. I'm telling you. And because of those partnerships we had, our partners were calling us, saying, what are y'all going to do? What can we do together? Right? And one of the biggest partners that called us was Feeding Tampa Bay. And they're this big organization that we would buy groceries for pennies on the dollar from their food pantry. And they said, man, right when the pandemic hit, people were losing their jobs and all this stuff was happening, right? Because everything was closing down. And so, they're like, man, we want to do a grocery drive-through. Can we use your parking lot? Do you have any volunteers? All the food pantries around the city are mostly run by older people that are at risk and they're all closing. We know your church is full of young people. Can you do this? We're like, sure, we got this. How much does the food cost? Oh no, we're just going to drop off tons and tons of food. It's free. We just need to get it out. Like, okay, let's go. So I want to show you a video of what happened for 14 months and how it started at this level and it grew to this level. And you'll be able to even kind of just see how we strategically used our space outside and our parking lot with our grocery drive-thru. Check this out. So if you notice, there was lines and lines of cars in our front parking lot, like rows of 10, and then one by one, those rows of cars were able to come around the building, and then they got their food. And by the time they came around to get their food, the transaction had to be so quick because we had hundreds of cars, right? And all these people, we had to quickly put the food in. All right, God bless, see you later. We couldn't stand and really have a conversation with them. And so, as I was praying, I felt guilty, almost God, we don't want to just give them stuff and not have any kind of touch. And then we were feeding Tampa Bay, and they're like, well, you can't pass anything out. That's our policy. And I'm like, oh man. When we were doing it on our own at first, they were giving us the food, and it was just us with 300 families. We were getting them flyers. We were praying for people. We were, now they brought their whole team. There's trucks, and there's 700, 800, 900 families every week. They're like, oh, we can't pass anything out. It's an official site. So I prayed about it. God gave me an idea. God can give you ideas to get around things sometimes in a way that's still legal, right? So I went up to the guys that were running, and I said, hey, people are waiting in line for sometimes 30, 45 minutes, and it's hot. A lot of people turn their cars off, and in Florida during the summer, it's hot all the time pretty much, right? And so I was like, well, what if we just had a team that went and passed out bottled waters to help people, make it a little nicer as they wait, give them something, keep them hydrated. Right? They're like, oh, that's a great idea, awesome. You have people to do that? Yeah, we'll create a water team, and we'll just go out and give out waters and take care of people, keep them happy. They're like, that's a great idea, please do that, awesome, every week do that. So what did we do? We went and had some custom water bottles made. Oh yeah. They had Crossover Church on there, Love Our City, crossoverchurch.org, watch services when we were closed, come on, we had the times and everything on there. And so we're like, hey, how you doing? Walking up to the doors, I'll be joking with people, like, hey, you want a water? How much? $5, but I'll give you one for $1. Nah, it's free, here you go. Oh, it's free? Oh, for real? Yeah, we just want to cheer up your day. How you doing? For a lot of people, that was the only outside interaction they have with anybody. You know, so how are you doing? How have you been? You just let them talk for a little bit. I said, you know what? I'm actually one of the pastors here. Can I pray for you? I never had nobody say no. And so much great ministry happened in the parking lot as we're out there sweating, giving out free water and inviting people to church. And people were coming week after week. They'd be like, I watched the service last week, Pastor. It was awesome. Because we were closed for a while, right? We're just online. I watched the service. It was amazing. All these people now are part of our church, watching online, right? And then when we reopened, a lot of them started to come back in person. And so when we reopened, there's this lady that came up to me, and she said, hey, are you the lead pastor? I said, yeah, that's me. So I thought that was you. You came up to my car a few months ago. We came to the grocery drive-thru. We really needed food, and it was such a blessing. And man, me and my daughter were going through so much stuff. You gave us some bottled waters, and you prayed for us. And you invited us to come to church. And here I am today. And I want to let you know, this is the first time I've been in church in over 20 years. So we got to rebrand outreach. It's got to look different. We got to just meet needs and let God open up some doors. And then we watch life change begin to happen. You can play that next video. This was this past Sunday. We baptized 60 people at church this past Sunday. And look who that is right there. That's Judy. I baptized her. That's the lady that came up to me from the grocery drive-thru. She's a member of our church now. She comes every week. She brings her grandchildren to church. They've never been in church in their life, but now they come every single week, pretty much. All because we just served them. We met a need. We assessed what the needs were in our community, and we watched God do the rest. We just love people right where they're at. Love your neighbors. Meet needs. And you see life change. This guy right here, let me tell you a story. His son got killed 2 months ago at a street racing event. He took him to an illegal street racing event. His son got hit by a motorcycle that was going 100 miles an hour right in front of him. We watched his son die. He held his son in his arms. Make matters worse, his ex-wife had him arrested a few days later. They had to have 2 separate funerals. Her family didn't want to be in the same room as his family. This guy never went to church before. He owns the barbershop that I go get my hair cut at. Because I always invited him to church, not every time, but regularly. And I talked to him, say what's up to him. When his son died, he called me. He didn't have my number. He got my number from the barber I get my hair cut from. And he was just bawling on the phone, cursing and F-bombs and everything. I didn't say no, I'm just loving on him. He's in distress. I didn't even stress coming to church. I showed up at the funeral, which meant a lot to him. It was an hour away. I drove to that funeral just to be there, hug him, show my face. He on his own started coming to church with the other barber. He's never been to church once before in his life. His family's been praying for him forever. And he told me on Easter Sunday, he's like, I want to get baptized next week. He texted me, he said, I want to get baptized. And he got baptized last Sunday. Come on, give God some praise. So we got to rebrand discipleship, y'all, and meet needs. And when we do that, we see God show up and life change can happen. But a lot of that takes us reframing some things. A lot of that takes us rebranding even ourselves and some of the labels and some of the hurt that we had. And so as we close this session, Lily, if you guys could bring the team over here, what we're going to do, we're going to have a funeral for our old labels right now. And what I want you to do in just a second is I want you to bring your old label up here. You can put it right here in the middle. And what you're going to do is you're simply going to take that label off. You can just crumple it up. You can tear it in half, whatever you want. You're just going to drop it right in here. And we're going to get rid of it. And as you come up from each side, Devon, if you could come up here and hold this for me.